It's great to have you with us. And I can see from our registration list that we are clearly continuing to attract viewers from 5 continents. Today, we have people from over a dozen countries and cities as far apart as Maui and Vladivostok, Sao Paulo and Calgary, Birmingham in the UK, and Padua in Italy. And actually, we have viewers from over half the states in this country, and our attendees include many museum professionals, docents, academicians, as well as collectors and very prominent dealers. Amazingly, this is our 18th Zoom panel discussion in only 17 months. And for those of you who are planning ahead, I know several of you want to know what we're doing next. Next month, we will have a live interview and a return to clay with the master of Celadon, Kawase Shinobu, together with several well-known experts in the field of Celadon. It is especially wonderful to be with you all here today to luxuriate in the beauty, creativity, and collecting history of Japanese ukiyo-e prints. As everyone here knows well, ukiyo-e has had a profound impact on the development of mid to late 19th century Western art, and that has continued on in the decorative arts, architecture, and landscape design, perhaps none more famously, or dare I say flamboyantly, than with America's most celebrated architect, Frank Lloyd Wright. So following in the footsteps of our extremely popular panel on Hokusai's Wave off of Kanagawa and Hiroshige's 100 Famous Views of Edo, and continuing the direction of our earlier panels on shuttered ukiyo-e exhibitions at nested academic museums, such as Oberlin and Yale, I thought it was most appropriate to turn our attention tonight to the remarkable Edmund Burr von Leck collection of Japanese prints, now owned by the Chazen Museum of Art at the University of Wisconsin. For me personally, as an alumna of this wonderful university and as a member of their museum council and the board of visitors of the art history department, it is a special treat to be turning our attention tonight to this amazing institution. It was here that I personally morphed from a geology major into art history and focused my passions on Japanese art history. This coincided with the opening of the brand new Elvia Museum, and it was there that I first learned how to handle, catalog, and even display works of art. Certainly without those inspiring faculty members, sadly all gone now, who inspired and guided me through this process, I most definitely would not be here with you tonight. This remarkable print collection, sadly for me, only came to the university in 1980, 6 years after I headed off to Columbia University. So consequently, I have only seen it in bits and pieces at various exhibitions, occasional alumni teaching opportunities, and gallery rotations. So I thought I would start the ball rolling tonight with just giving you a very minimal overview of what I believe, after more than 5 decades in the field, are a few of the highlights. Although I tell you, I'm leaving out the Utagawa School because I'm leaving that in the capable hands of Laura Mueller, who you'll hear more about later. So here are just 4 unbelievably glorious Haranobu prints with exceptional color that are tip of the iceberg of what one can find in the Van Vleck collection in terms of color, rarity, and remarkable condition. Or here are 3 slides by the perhaps lesser known Ipitsusai Buncho, one of the Utagawa, the Katsukawa family of artists who focused on kabuki prints in the 1770s and 1780s, who's much harder to find, much rarer to access, and 3 remarkable, truly remarkable images that came from Frank Lloyd Wright. Or let's take the very famous Utamaro, known to, I'm sure, every single person who's with us tonight, and 4 glorious examples, exceptionally rare, impeccable impressions, glorious color, and can stand up to prints that are in the Art Institute of Chicago collection or the more famous Metropolitan or MFA Boston collections. And there they are in Madison, Wisconsin. There are also, I should say, many of Utamoto's contemporaries in the collection, artists named Eishi, Eisho, Utagawa, Kitagawa followers, and many of the Bijin prints of that era that are so popular today by a wide variety of both famous artists as well as much lesser known artists. Or the super celebrated Hokusai, which while not the world's greatest impressions, they actually have a great wave. They have a red Fuji, Fuji and lightning, many of the designs from the 36 views of Mount Fuji, as well as some of the designs from the Tales of the Nurse or even ghost prints, Kachoe, extraordinary holdings. Or Kacho in its entirety. Bird flower prints obviously were of appeal both to Van Vleck and to Frank Lloyd Wright. And here you have three remarkable prints in terms of condition and color. And this too is a tip of the iceberg of the holdings in this remarkable collection. Here's just a final slide of the wide variety that was given to the university and then continued to be collected from a remarkable group of pillar prints, Hashira, and I think we'll hear more about that later. A Shune bus portrait that I frankly have never seen before, Gakute landscapes, or a surimono, and I thought I'd seen everything when it comes to that genre, this little Eisen surimono of the thunder god at the lower right. And to my surprise, quite a lovely collection of Shinhanga prints from the early 20th century by artists such as Hashiguchi Goyo, Hasui, and others that bring the collection full circle into the 20th century. So I hope I've whetted your appetite. And in order to really bring this subject to the forefront and to articulate it and make it visual for you, I brought a remarkable group of individuals and knowledgeable people to talk to you tonight. First, we have Dr. Amy Gilman, who's the director of the Chazen Museum of Art. James Wehn, her new curator for works of art on paper. Dr. Kitman Phillips, better known as Jean, the recently retired professor of Japanese art at the University of Wisconsin, and his former graduate student and my former gallery director, Laura Mueller. I will present more formal introductions as I preface my first question to each of these wonderful scholars. So tonight, with over 500 people originally booked, I'm not sure how many people have actually shown up, I think we can all agree that the popularity of ukiyo-e has never been stronger. And combine that with the fame of this renowned architect, this is a fascinating topic for us to delve into for the next hour or so. So first, I would like to introduce Amy Gilman. Amy joined the Chazen as director in September of 2017, and she oversees all administrative, financial, and curatorial duties there. Since her arrival, she has stewarded a 5-year strategic plan, replaced unplaced internships with paid ones, hugely important. And prior to the pandemic, dramatically expanded the museum's hours to 12 hours a day, 7 days per week, which I believe makes it the most accessible, or made it the most accessible museum in the country. During COVID and an unusual academic year, she initiated the development of flexible, adaptive, and virtual curricula for use by the faculty, connecting the museum's permanent collection with courses and themes of resilience, surviving trauma, and art and activism. But before all that, Amy spent 12 years at the Toledo Museum of Art in Toledo, Ohio, and most recently served as its deputy director. She is an alumna of the Getty Leadership Institute and earned her doctorate in art history at Case Western Reserve in Cleveland, Ohio, and a Master's of Fine Arts Photography from Columbia College in Chicago, and a bachelor's degree in performance studies from Northwestern University. So Amy, my first question goes to you. And just a second. I have to change course. Amy, based on your extensive background and experience, the Chazen is certainly lucky, and I can say that for sure, to have you at the helm. For those who have not yet visited this extraordinary institution, could you tell us a bit about the museum and its history? What is its role as a resource for a university campus and the broader community? And what do you envision for the collection and the institution in the near future?
Thank you. Thank you, Joan, and thank you for inviting us to be a part of this. I'm delighted to be here and to join all of you, and to allow me just a short amount of time to introduce the museum to you, especially to those of you who are perhaps not as familiar as Joan is with the museum. So Joan mentioned in passing that she arrived here just as the museum was being founded, and indeed, the museum was founded in 1970 with the opening of the building that you see on your right here in this image, the Conrad Elvium building. The museum was then known as the Elvium Art Center and later became the Elvium Museum of Art. And in 2005, along with a transformative gift from the Chazen family, it was renamed the Chazen Museum, and eventually it included the building of a second building, which is the building that you see on the left, connected by a bridge in the middle there, the Chazen building, which was completed in 2011. And from the very beginning of this museum, in the Harry Weiss designed, so architecture is important to this museum from the very beginning, in the Harry Weiss designed building, in the Elvium building, was the bringing together of three entities. The museum, which was brand new at that time, the Kohler Art Library, which was also brand new at that moment, and the Department of Art History, which was not at all brand new at that moment. And it was but really bringing together these three entities with the intention of having a real fostering engagement and interaction between students and faculty and research, and really being able to work with real objects. And indeed, when Joan arrived on campus, part of her introduction eventually to this kind of work was doing a lot of cataloging and handling of objects. And indeed, that's something that we continue today, is actually that really strong relationship with the museum and the art history department. And very particularly, we do continue to have art history students, both undergraduate and graduate students, who work in the museum in a lot of different roles, often within the curatorial department. I will do a small plug here for another museum program that is going on later this afternoon or later this evening. So after you all do this, maybe grab a little bit of dinner and tune in again to the museum's Facebook page, where you can be a part of a program that Noah Mapes, who is a recent graduate of the undergraduate program here in the Department of Art History, who is now a graduate student at Cornell, who's going to be talking about a selection of works that he curated that is now installed on the museum's second floor by the artist Truman Lowe. And I just make that little pitch because I hope that some of you will decide to tune in, but it's also that this relationship between the museum and the art history department is very much ongoing, and it serves both, right? We really enjoy having the students here. We love to give them really substantial things to work on, and we hope that those substantial things that they work on will also carry with them into the rest of their careers. So part of being a teaching museum, and for those of you who haven't been here, and I'm sure many of you have not, we are the largest collecting museum in the Big Ten, and we are the second largest museum in Wisconsin, second only to the Milwaukee Art Museum, which many of you are likely also familiar with. So we're very large. We have 150,000 square feet. We don't have a small footprint on campus. We're very prominent, and that's very physically prominent. You could see it in the fact that we have this one original building and the second building connected by a bridge. We are located at that space between campus and community. So, you know, we are really here to be a resource for campus. And we really think about what it means to be a university art museum, right? What does it mean to serve teaching, learning, and research here? And one of the things I will say about being part of this program, so Joan, back to you, is that we are also very specifically a collection of collections. So museums have personalities, right? Some of them have personalities because of a very narrow collecting focus, and some of them have personalities because of the way their collections have grown over time. And I don't think it serves any museum to try to be just like everybody else, right? Like I have no desire to be like that. We are very much place specific, and part of that is being while we do acquire individual objects through acquisition or through gift, oftentimes the most impactful things that come with the collection come in these large groups of whole collections that come to us and transform that part of the museum. And indeed, the collection we're talking about today is one of those very collections, and it makes the museum we are not necessarily comprehensive, but it means that we have very deep strengths in particular areas that I think give us a lot of personality, right? Like we are a museum unlike any other museum collection. And I think that part of our stewardship and part of what James is working to do as the curator of works on paper is really enhance those distinctive spaces. And so tonight, I think is a really great way to highlight one of the most important.
Thank you, Amy. I couldn't agree with you more. And as you said, and I said, I was there in 1970. And so I have watched this museum grow from collection to collection. And certainly the Van Vleck collection puts the museum on the map from a Japanese point of view, but the Lane collection of 20th century sculpture and painting certainly does the same. Glass collections, there are many, many strengths at the Chazen that set it apart from every other place. So it's great to have you on board with such an eclectic museum as we wait for the next collection to come your way. Thank you, Amy. My next question goes to Gene Phillips. Gene is, as he's been called nearly universally, excuse me, sort of embarrassing, was the Joan B. Mirviss Professor of Japanese Art History, and he's now emeritus. It's really sad. Gene has just retired. And the very good news for those of you out there listening on this call who are looking for a new position or to change your life is this tenure track position is now officially up for grabs. So get your resumes in order. He has served as the chair of the art history department twice and has also previously served as the director of the religious studies program and of the Center for East Asian Studies. In addition to his teaching, Gene has lectured on an enormous range of topics in Japanese art and has published extensively, most prominently with his 2000 publication, The Practices of Painting in Japan, 1475 to 1500, published by Stanford University Press. He's been a visiting scholar at both Gakushuin and Kyoto National Universities. His research has always focused on the Kano School of Painting and medieval Japanese art and religious practice. Gene did finish his PhD at UC Berkeley in 1993 and received his BA from Harvard. And for many of us here on this panel tonight, one of his greatest accomplishments was being a founder of the indispensable Japanese Art History Forum. So thank you, Gene, for that. So my first question to Gene is, building on what we just heard from Amy, the Chazen Museum has a remarkable collection of art from all different regions, time periods, movements, and media. As a professor, you have taken many classes over the years into the galleries, and I would dare say in storage, to show them artworks from Asia, some encountering such works in person for the very first time. Could you take our audience on a similar journey through the backside of the museum and introduce us to the museum's major holdings in Asian art?
Sure. Thank you so much, Joan. And I'm delighted to be here with folks both from the art history side and the museum side, which is what we really want to be all about. So the first collection that I'd like to talk to you about is the Jane Werner Watson collection, which after the Van Vleck collection is the most outstanding of all of the Asian art collections here. Jane Werner Watson was an alumna and a distinguished children's book author who lived in India for a short time. And she collected extensively in the area of Indian miniature paintings, Indian folk paintings, and Tibetan tankas. There are a variety of other kinds of works on paper that she collected, and she donated them all to the university. And so I've just put up a couple of the really outstanding works from the miniature part of her collection, just to give you a sense of the variety that's in there. And, like the Van Vleck collection of prints, these are works on paper, so students can't just walk into the galleries and see them. But thanks to the generosity of the museum staff, you can make appointments and hold a class in what I call the print room, but I think it's more properly what the works on paper or something. Anyway, so we also have a collection of Chinese paintings, and this was donated by Simon K. Chen, an alum, and his wife Rosemary Ho Chen, and they gave more than 100 works of Chinese art. Most prominent among them are 19th and especially 20th century paintings. And here on the left, you just see one really striking one by Qin Tianzi of an eagle. The museum and the art history department and its students are also fortunate to have access to a small but good collection of Chinese paintings that's on long-term loan. And here we see an example of one of those on the left by the famous bird and flower painter, Lu Ji. So along with some other works of Chinese painting, there's a small but very useful for teaching purposes collection. So moving on, up in the galleries full time are some, very fine works of Asian sculpture, especially India and Pakistan and Southeast Asia. These were given by a variety of donors. You see just two examples here. One of the famous Gandharan reliefs, and over on the right, a Hindu sculpture of Varahi, the boar goddess. And so I cannot imagine having had to teach the survey of Asian art without being able to take students up to the galleries to see these. It's not a big collection, but it gives them a real sense of the difference in material, size, and so forth. Can I have the next one, please? So there also is a collection of Southeast Asian sculpture, particularly strong in works from Thailand. And here we see two of these by different donors, but the majority of the works from Thailand were given by Dr. Sarah M. Becker. So this is another, what you might call a small strength in the collection, and wonderful to have for a teacher to take students to see. It's easy to overlook this collection that I'm showing you now, which is a collection of netsuke, these very small carved objects made from wood or more often ivory, but sometimes other materials as well. They're only 1 or 2 inches in size. But they really are great because they help you show students and help anyone to understand just the level of technical prowess of Japanese artisans. And also just the extraordinary range of subjects that fascinated people and that were so much a part of their lives in the Edo period. I have a particular fondness for this collection because the former director of the museum, Russell Panchenko, came to me one day and said, "Gene, netsuke, I think I have a collection. Do you want to come with me?" And so we headed off to Mrs. Frauchi's house, looked at them, packed them up ourselves and brought them back. So, you know, as was being said earlier, you just never know, you know, collections come in and they can greatly enrich the museum's holdings. Have the next one, please. Now, the museum does not have any significant collection of Japanese paintings or works of clay art, but there has been a steady acquisition over the last decade or so, partly thanks to Joan, who's made some donations, but also purchases. And so, you know, that collection is slowly growing. You can't always depend just on, you know, major gifts of whole collections. So that's, you know, that's some of the great strengths. It's also nice to have works coming in, you know, individually that really enhance the collection and make for teachers a much richer experience you're able to offer the students. So thank you.
Thank you, Jean. It was a lovely tour through some of the better known areas of the collection and the lesser known areas of the collection. Hopefully will inspire others to think about the whole still existing at in the Chazen's collection. It's always been fun to help augment the collection, and particularly the contemporary clay that Amy's predecessor, Russell Panchenko, was so focused on adding and building within the Chazen, relates so well to their more substantial glass collection. So thank you for putting up those slides. My next question goes to James. James Wehn is the appropriately named Van Vleck Curator of Works of Art on Paper at the Chazen Museum of Art. He completed his PhD in art history as an Andrew Mellon Foundation Fellow in the joint doctoral program at Case Western Reserve, like Amy, and the Cleveland Museum of Art. His doctoral research examines the development of the print market in Northern Europe and its effect on cultural values concerning art, authorship, copying, and image-making practice during the late 15th century. James has published articles in the Print Quarterly and in Art and Print, and prior to his arrival at the Chazen in 2019, he curated exhibitions of prints and drawings at the Minneapolis Institute of Art and the Philadelphia Museum of Art and the Cleveland Museum of Art. So very experienced. And now he's plunging headlong into a new field, a new challenge, which is ukiyo-e. So James, as we have learned from Jean, the importance of significant gifts to the university to build the Chazen Museum's diverse collection in breadth and depth. We've learned so much, and Amy has added to that as well. But one truly extraordinary gift to the museum is the focus of our discussion tonight, most obviously. Could you share with us the story of how Frank Lloyd Wright's Japanese woodblock prints came to be assembled and then later gifted to the university? James.
Thank you, Joan. Yes, of course, and it's such an interesting story because, of course, Frank Lloyd Wright is famous worldwide for his visionary architecture and decorative arts. But until I came to the Chazen, I didn't realize that what's probably less well known is that he played such an important role in popularizing Japanese prints in the United States in the early 20th century. Wright was keenly interested in Japanese art, which he collected and used to decorate his homes. He was an active dealer of Japanese prints from the time of his first trip to Japan in 1905. And he was especially attracted to ukiyo-e, which he bought cheaply in Japan and sold to clients in the United States. Here you're looking at a photo of Frank Lloyd Wright with a few Japanese prints in the background. And I also want to take a moment here to mention that many of the photos and information about Wright that I'm sharing with you today can be found in Julia Meach's book, Frank Lloyd Wright and the Art of Japan, the Architect's Other Passion. It is excellently researched and has a wealth of information for those of you who might be interested in learning more on this topic. According to Julia Meach, there was a time when Wright's career as a Japanese print dealer rivaled his work as an architect in terms of his attention and financial gain. And to some extent, the added income from print sales helped Wright sustain himself as an architect. In this scene, you're looking at an interior view of the home that Wright designed for Darwin and Isabel Martin. This is the south room of that home, decorated with Japanese prints. We see some bird and flower images, landscapes from a series of views along the Tokaido Road, and pillar prints featuring Japanese women like Katsukawa Shunsho. Wright was especially fond of Japanese printmaker Uragawa Hiroshige, who lived from 1797 until 1858, shortly before Wright was born. Wright organized the first retrospective exhibition of Hiroshige's prints in 1906 at the Art Institute of Chicago. And this exhibition was also the first time the museum displayed ukiyo-e. Perhaps by design, Wright's exhibition coincided with the museum's 19th annual exhibition of the Chicago Architectural Club. It was certainly strategic. This slide has a photograph from a second exhibition of Japanese prints at the Art Institute of Chicago. Wright was not only a major lender to the large show, but he also designed the displays, incorporating elements of his Prairie School style. Note especially Wright's special display stands on the shelf in the middle of this photograph. They have a small platform that is capable of holding a flower vase, and they are also able to frame a Japanese print. In this case, we can see some Japanese script in these special stands. In 1912, Wright wrote a short treatise titled The Japanese Print and Interpretation, which makes clear his interest in ukiyo-e was not so much the subject matter, but the compositional strategies of the scenes. He especially valued the image's geometric structure and considered the supreme principle of Japanese aesthetics to be, quote, a stringent simplification by elimination of the insignificant, quote. And in his autobiography, written a few decades later, he uses similar language to describe his own philosophy of architectural design. Today, one can trace thousands of ukiyo-e that Frank Lloyd Wright collected or sold in museums like the Metropolitan Museum of Art, which bought directly from Wright, the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, the Dallas Art Museum, the Minneapolis Institute of Art, and of course, the Chazen Museum of Art here at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Although Wright had some success dealing in Japanese prints, they were also at the heart of his financial difficulties. On more than one occasion, Wright used Japanese prints as collateral for loans, and this is why, in a roundabout way, the Chazen Museum of Art now preserves many prints collected and owned by Wright. In 1926, the Bank of Wisconsin took possession of more than 5,000 of Wright's Japanese prints, which he estimated at that time to be worth about $40,000, to secure mortgages for Taliesin, his estate near Spring Green, Wisconsin, and the contents of that estate. In 1928, in order to make back some of the losses from Wright's then delinquent loan, the bank sold approximately 4,000 of those prints to Edward Burr Van Vleck, a mathematics professor at UW-Madison. The sale price was $4,000, or about $1 per print. Wright was, of course, outraged, but the deal was done, and Wright's prints became the most significant part of Van Vleck's personal Japanese print collection. Van Vleck continued collecting Japanese prints until around 1941. He sold some of Wright's prints and he gave others away, but most remained in his collection. And when he died, he left the prints to his son, John Hasbrouck Van Vleck, who we can see on the next slide. John H. Van Vleck was a mathematician and a physicist. He was co-recipient of the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1977 for his contributions to the understanding of the behavior of electrons in magnetic solids. In this photo, he is receiving the Lawrence Medal at the Royal Netherlands Academy of Arts and Sciences in Amsterdam. In the early 1980s, John and his widow bequeathed nearly 4,000 Japanese prints to the Elvia Museum of Art, which is now called the Chazen. And as a result, the Chazen has about 2,800 Japanese woodcuts previously owned by Frank Lloyd Wright. This is one of, if not the largest groups of Wright's Japanese prints to survive together.
Thank you, James. Yes, we're just touching the tip of the iceberg. I just have a quick question for you, since we'll get to it later, but when I showed the picture of the Hashiguchi Goyos, which when Wright was in Japan and when these collections were dispersed in 1928, was almost still wet off the presses. Did those Shinhanga prints come from Wright, or were those prints collected by John Van Vleck's father? Do you know?
I don't off the top of my head,
Okay.
but that is a good question. And we do have provenance information on our website for every Japanese print. So if you were to look them up on our website and look under provenance, you'd be able to see whether it comes from Wright through Edward Van Vleck to his son, or if it was something he purchased elsewhere. I'm sorry, I don't know the answer.
Oh, I guess I will do my own research, but I also will tell the audience that all of these prints are available on the museum's website in color. They can be enlarged, downloaded. It's a great resource for those studying ukiyo-e. My next question is to Laura Mueller. Hi, Laura. Laura is currently working as an independent curator, and she served most recently as the curator of art at the Portland Japanese Garden. She was previously director of this gallery and went on to establish a curatorial consulting and collection management company. In addition, she has worked on major museum exhibitions at the Japan Society and the Newark Museum. She has published multiple exhibition catalogs. Most importantly and most relevantly today is Competition and Collaboration, Japanese Prints of the Utagawa School at the Chazen Museum of Art, and has lectured widely. She's lectured all over the United States and in Japan. She earned her doctorate in Japanese art history at UW-Madison under Jean, and was the recipient of 2 very prestigious Japanese grants for her dissertation research at Gakushuin University in Tokyo. Laura, because of Frank Lloyd Wright's profound interest in ukiyo-e, and with an architect's keen eye for composition and design, there must be some specific characteristics that defined his extensive collection now owned by the Chazen. So based on your very deep familiarity with these works, what do you think are some of the prominent features and particular strengths of the Frank Lloyd Wright material? And what sets this group apart from the other seemingly similar collections at other US museums or elsewhere? Laura?
Thank you, Joan, for inviting me to participate in this conversation. And I'm honored to be a part of it. And this collection holds a very special place in my heart as the inspiration of my dissertation, Competition and Collaboration, Edo-Print Culture, Lineage, Creative Specialization, and Market Eminence for Artists of the Utagawa School, 1770 to 1900, under the guidance of my fellow panelist, Jean Phillips. The more I studied and worked with the collection, the more I came to realize the importance of the collection and the richness and connection of Frank Lloyd Wright's vision that it represents. As a starting point in discussing the strengths of the Van Vleck collection, I think it's important to start by briefly talking about the influence the work of Japanese art, and most specifically, Japanese prints had on Frank Lloyd Wright. For as you see, this connection is what drove not only Wright, but I think also greatly influenced Van Vleck in making this the exceptional collection that it is. Wright states in his autobiography, quote, "Ever since I discovered the print, Japan had appealed to me as the most romantic, artistic, nature-inspired country on earth. Later, I found that Japanese art and architecture really did have organic character. Their art was near the earth and a more indigenous product of native conditions of life and work. Therefore, more nearly modern, as I saw it, than any European civilization, alive or dead." Wright goes on to state, quote, "If Japanese prints were to be deducted from my education, I don't know what direction the whole might have taken," unquote. With this self-professed obsession with Japanese prints, as we have heard, Wright became an avid collector, dealer, and enthusiast for Japanese prints. The development of his concept of organic architecture, as discussed in Architectural Record of 1914, was no doubt connected to his study and collecting of Japanese prints. The core principles of his organic architecture include the ideas that creative possibilities of form, color, pattern, texture, proportion, and rhythm are all demonstrated in nature. It is no coincidence that these exact principles of form, color, pattern, texture, proportion, and rhythm are all commonly used descriptives of Japanese prints. Like this work from the X collection of Frank Lloyd Wright of Nihonbashi and Edobashi from his series 100 Famous Views of Edo. Most recently, I have found it incredibly interesting that these exact ideas seem to have come full circle through the work of the contemporary architect Kengo Kuma, the architect of my most recent place of employment, the Portland Japanese Garden. Kuma reinforces these exact same ideas that inspired the work of Wright in his own 2008 book, Shizen Nakenshiku, translated as Natural Architecture. Unfortunately, this work has only been translated in Chinese and French at this point. In this work, Kuma-san goes to great lengths to revisit Wright's intriguing relationship with Japanese prints, and most specifically landscape prints of Utagawa Hiroshige. According to Kuma, Wright respected Hiroshige for an idea of spatial continuity. He goes on to analyze multiple prints by Hiroshige, providing examples of Hiroshige's use of spatial ordering inspired Wright, and in turn, the architectural work of Kuma himself. He states the appreciation and comprehension of space in these works is critical to recognizing the uniqueness of Japanese style, because it was very different from the European approach and reliance on vanishing point and golden ratio. Kuma paid tribute to the work of Hiroshige with the completion in 2000 of the Nakagawa-machi Bato Hiroshige Bijutsukan, or Hiroshige Museum of Art located in Tochigi Prefecture. It is with this foundation that directs us to what I feel are the great strengths of the collection. You just have to flip through the catalog of the collection compiled by Roger Keyes in 1990, and the vast bulk of the collection of works are in the genre of landscapes or fukeiga. Like this design by Utagawa Hiroshige, that is not an ex-Frank Lloyd Wright collection, but a work that was added by Van Vleck of Hakone from the series 53 Stations of the Tokaido Road by Utagawa Hiroshige. And a slightly closer look at the collection will reveal the preponderance of the landscape works of this specific artist, Utagawa Hiroshige. More than half of the over 4,000 prints included in the Van Vleck gift, as demonstrated by these two examples by Hiroshige, Yokaichi from the series 53 Stations of the Tokaido, and Agematsu from the series 69 Stations of the Kiso Kaido, both from the X collection of Frank Lloyd Wright, and both prime examples of Hiroshige's novel approaches to spatial ordering and continuity in landscape compositions. But as with all great collectors, it is clear that Frank Lloyd Wright was interested in the source of Hiroshige's creative genius, This is most clearly demonstrated by the unusually large number of Uli Utagawa school artists that are included in the collection. This includes the founder of the Utagawa school, Utagawa Toyoharu. Next slide. As shown here in two works from Toyoharu's preeminent series of perspective pictures, or ukiyo, that were collected by Frank Lloyd Wright. On the left, you have Enjoying the Evening Cool at Ryogoku, and on the right, View of Mimeguri. These works of perspective pictures highlight the early emphasis on landscapes and origins of the practice of spatial ordering by Utagawa and Hiroshige that so appealed to Frank Lloyd Wright. The collection also includes prominent holdings of a follower of Toyoharu and teacher of Hiroshige, Utagawa Toyohiro. Next slide, please. These landscape works are from two of Toyohiro's most celebrated landscape series. The work on the left is from a sample from 8 Views of Edo, and the work on the right is an example from the series 6 Tama Rivers, both works from the X collection of Frank Lloyd Wright. Again, emphasizing his key interest in the creative handling of perspective and spatial ordering that was passed on to Hiroshige. But I would be remiss in focusing on only landscape works. The collection also, as Joan pointed out, by many artists of this period, but also the holdings of non-landscape artists of the Uli Utagawa school. Next slide. Here is a work by fellow student of Toyoharu, Utagawa Toyokuni. It was Toyohiro and Toyokuni that established the two main branches of the Utagawa school. Here is a 5-panel pentaptych viewing of cherry blossoms at the new Yoshiwara, also an X from the X collection of Frank Lloyd Wright. Or, next slide, this 6-panel double triptych, Fireworks at Ryogoku Bridge, that was added by Van Vleck. In addition, there is a select group of exceptional early kabuki works by the Utagawa school. Next slide. Like this print by Utagawa Toyokuni of the actors Ichikawa Omezo I and Matsumoto Yonesaburo I as Umegawa and Chubei, also from the X collection from Frank Lloyd Wright. In conclusion, I think it's clear by these examples that the strengths of the collection follow closely to the passions in print design that most inspired Wright. An analysis of the greater Van Vleck collection provide evidence that Van Vleck continued in his mode of collecting, building on strengths already established by Frank Lloyd Wright. Having a collection of this caliber at a teaching institution is a remarkable thing, and it provides excellent opportunities for future study, research, and exhibition.
Thank you, Laura. That was a wonderful dip our pinky toe in the water as to the incredible range and depth of the Utagawa School in Madison. And for those of you who don't already own Laura's book or haven't put it by your bedstead, I highly recommend it as a wonderful point of departure to understand the depth of collecting and unearthing a often overlooked aspect of ukiyo-e studies. Thanks, Laura. I'm going to turn for my last question to Jean. I'm going to have a couple more questions for Laura and for James. Jean, in your case, as a longtime faculty member, how have you utilized the print collection and the other Asian materials as teaching tools for your students? And can you tell us a little bit about one or two most interesting experiences you've had with engaging your students with this material at the Chazen? Jean?
And thank you. So I always made use of the collection. I did not come to the university as a print expert, but as you noted, a Kano painting person. And it took me just a little while to realize, how valuable the collection was for teaching. And thanks to the openness of the LVM, now Chazen staff, to helping out, it really made it possible, to bring students in, to see examples of the print collection, to have them write papers on the collection, to have them write condition reports on prints, you know, and to really engage with them on, you know, looking at these works not just as images, but also as objects. The one regret I have is that I really didn't do more organization of prints with print exhibitions with classes. I did it early in my career. And somehow, as you noted in your introduction of me, I got too carried away into administration and really left behind one of the most fun aspects of teaching you can have. So I think it was my second year here, work with students, graduate students in a seminar to organize a small exhibition of images of women in Japanese prints. Of course, an incredibly complex topic with great diversity. And we called it Paper Women. And we just tried to show some of the range of representations of women's, from drowsy, dreaming courtesans to women warriors. And I'm cheating a little bit here because this is not one of the prints that was in the exhibition. It's one that in retrospect, I wish we had had. And Laurel will talk about it later, having helped to bring it into the collection. But it does show the range of sorts of images, and the students were able to write very productively as a result of this. I worked with undergraduates too, more than once. In this case, it was what we would call a niche display, not a full exhibition, but a display of maybe a dozen prints, I think I remember. And our focus here was on this tall, narrow format, the pillar prints, because it gives it puts such a focus on the problems of composition and the various ways of solving problems of composition and finding, more importantly, creative uses of this unusual composition. And I have to confess, another reason I picked this topic to work with students is the print here on the far left by Toyonobu, which for a long time was thought to be the only example in the world, but I think a couple of others have been found. But it's an amazing print from the mid-18th century in almost pristine condition. I think one of the great highlights of the collection. So being able to take students in, even get out magnifying glasses, and look closely at works like this, it really was one of the high points of my teaching career. And so I hope my successor is not so foolish as me and can makes this a regular aspect of their teaching career. And again, I want to say, back in the day, I worked with Drew Stevens, the curator of works on papers. But at the end of my career, he was no longer there. And so I was really happy when I worked briefly with James, bringing classes in, and he was just as enthusiastic and helpful in helping out a poor faculty member whose knowledge of the details of technique and so forth and how to organize things was rather, it was a great compliment to what I could do. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. I was lucky enough once when I was there for a council meeting and encountered you with your students in the print room at the Chazen. And even I, the jaded dealer of being in the field for 40 plus years, was so excited to see the array that you yourself had selected to teach from. It was wonderful. So I felt like I was a student all over again. And I'm sure you've inspired many of those young men and women with your introduction to this amazing collection. Thank you, Jean.
Thank you.
Laura, My last question for you is, can you tell us something about, I mean, when you were there under Russell's tenure, you were given a lot of curatorial responsibilities. And when you were doing that, can you tell us about some of the more recent additions to the Chazen's print collection that you've been involved with? And how did you use those acquisitions for your exhibition and publication, competition, and collaboration? Laura.
Great, thank you, Joan. The collection has continued to grow over the years since the original Van Vleck gift of 1980. The growth is part from smaller gifts, but most notably due to the remarkable endowment that accompanied the gift of prints and allowed for regular purchases to help grow the collection. These acquisitions have occurred under the research and work of James' predecessor of the curator works of paper at the Chazen, Drew Stevens. Acquisitions under his guidance tended to build on the strengths that I talked about of these early Utagawa school artists. Like this acquisition from 1997 that you see on the left, which is a collaborative design by Utagawa Hiroshige and Utagawa Kunisada, Nihon Bridge, from the series 53 Stations of Two Brushes. The collaborative design references the earlier work by Hiroshige with a view below the bridge in the inset, while highlighting the specialization of Kunisada with the inclusion of the large figures and the small doll of an attendant that directly references the attendants walking across the bridge in Hiroshige's original work on the right that was collected by comes from the X collection of Frank Lloyd Wright. And here's another collection from 2000, also under Drew Stevens, that highlights a theme that I took up in the exhibition, competition, and collaboration. This work is by Utagawa Hiroshige. This print, Shinabazu Bentan Shrine, from the series Collection of Modern Bentan Goddesses, highlights the specialization of landscape work by Hiroshige in the inset of the location of Shinobazu, while demonstrating Hiroshige's own skill in the figure of the beauty, who interestingly is depicted viewing kabuki prints that include the signatures of Hiroshige's fellow Utagawa school artists, Toyokuni and Kunisada. As mentioned, the collection also grew by smaller gifts. Next slide. Most notably, the gift of Linda and John Comstock in 2003 that included the print on the bottom by Utagawa Hiroshige of his celebrated landscape triptych, 8 Views from Kanazawa Bay in Moonlight, from the series Snow, Moon, and Flowers. This small but exceptional Comstock gift offered enhanced appreciation of the strengths that I've discussed that were established in the previous Van Vleck collection, as referenced by the related collaborative triptych that you see on top by Hiroshige and Kunisada, Akashi from an Elegant Prince Genji, with a distinctive similar background handling done by Hiroshige, which is also a work from the Frank Lloyd Wright collection. As mentioned, I had the great fortune of working on the collection for many years as a graduate student at UW-Madison while pursuing my doctorate, and these strengths of the Van Vleck collection led me in developing the traveling exhibition, competition, and collaboration, Japanese Prints of the Utagawa School, that occurred in 2007 at the Chazen Museum, or as with the alternate title used at the Brooklyn Museum in 2008, Utagawa, Masters of the Japanese Print, 1770 to 1900. With the gracious generosity of the funds available for acquisition, I was able to develop the themes of the exhibition to showcase the collection's strength while enhancing our understanding of the development of the entire Utagawa school. Having very specific goals for the exhibition and a relative short time frame, the acquisitions were researched and developed, finding desired works from galleries in the US and Japan, as well as across Europe. Building on the strengths of the Van Vleck collection, I looked to find examples of prints that, while were lacking in the current collection, would help to bring better understanding to the strengths that were already established. One area included the prominent genre of warrior prints. Next slide. Or mushae, as they're called. Those were a specialty of the celebrated Utagawa school artist Utagawa Kuniyoshi. Here we have a colorful triptych designed by Kuniyoshi, Minamoto yo Yorimitsu, slaying Kidomaru, acquired in 2003. That really demonstrates the movement and dynamism that came to be a major feature of the genre of warrior prints. Or these two acquisitions, also from 2003, by Kuniyoshi. From one of his most celebrated series, 800 Heroes of Our Country's Suikoden, all told. And I'm glad, Jean, that you were so excited about that print. This is one of my favorite acquisitions from this group that we acquired for the competition and collaboration project. The work on the left of Seimenju Yoshi, and this favorite one on my right of Fujino, the wife of Izumi no Saburo Tadahiro. Again, really highlighting this very distinct characteristics of this dynamism, the strength, the movement that was a really strong characteristic of the Mushe or warrior prints, which had been a rather weaker point of the collection up to this point. Other acquisitions included excellent examples of works in other print genres, like, next slide, please. Like these two bold works acquired in 2006 of kabuki prints or yakusha-e by Utagawa Kunisada from his celebrated untitled series of large head portraits. The actor on the left, the actor Ichikawa Danzo VI as Kakogawa Honzo, on the left, and the actor Sawamaru Sojiro V as Kan Shoujo on the right. Filling the narrative of the Utagawa school required finding examples of later artists that claimed lineage to the Utagawa name. This area was particularly weak in the Van Vleck collection, but I felt it was important to tell the story of the development and success of the school as a whole, while bringing additional depth to the medium ukiyo-e woodblock prints during the dawn of the modern age. Examples like these two vertical diptychs by the later Utagawa school artist, Tsukiyoka Yoshitoshi, The Depravity of Mount Seigen on the left, and Watanabe no Tsuna cutting off the demon's arm at Rashomon Gate on the right, both acquisitions from 2004. These works demonstrate new modes of representation while remaining true to the Utagawa creative lineage. We also have these two acquisitions also from 2004, the triptych May from the series The 12 Months of Kawanabe Kyosai on the right, or the fascinating work on the left by Toyoharu Kunichika of the actor Sawamura Tosho II as Sasaki Genosuke from the series Photograph Studio Now on Sale, or in Japanese, Shashin Dokoro, Kyo Uridashi, where you see the artist addressing the advent of the competing medium of photography with a distinctive photographic representation of the kabuki portrait, which stands in contrast to the prevailing artistic traditions of actor portraits up until this time. And I must not forget, next slide, please, this dynamic triptych composition, also by Toyoharu Kunichika, of the actor Ichikawa Sandanji I as Akiyama Ki no Kami from the series New Plays of the Meiji-za Theater, the conflagration, that due to its bold colors and graphic composition came to be a favorite of the marketing departments of the museums when they were promoting the exhibition, and which surprisingly found its way to the front page of the March 22nd, 2008 issue of the New York Times, along with the review by Ken Johnson of the exhibition when it was held at the Brooklyn Museum. These acquisitions are just a sample of the works acquired for the exhibition project, competition, and collaboration. And if interested, I hope you will view the accompanying catalog. A little push, competition collaboration is available at the Chazen Museum shop if you'd like to order it from them. That help tell the story of the prominent Utagawa school and that were built on the original strengths of the Van Vleck collection and the vision and legacy of Frank Lloyd Wright.
Thank you, Laura. I remember when this image was, I think it was Russell put it out on the outside of the Chazen on this huge banner. So as you drove down Johnson Street, I don't know how many traffic accidents that image caused, as people must have been zoomed off the street to look at it. It was an amazing achievement, obviously a really good buy on your part. And kudos for your curatorship and acumen to build this collection in a new direction that will be a great legacy for future students and for James to plunge still further. My last question goes to James. And it seems a logical development from Laura's comments. So how do you see this collection developing in the future? Are there any specific plans in terms of exhibitions, publications, or other types of events going forward on the calendar?
Those are great questions, Joan. And I can see, having just listened to Laura's presentation, that the strides that she and Drew Stevens have made, which I'm already aware of, really set a high bar with respect to additional acquisitions to enhance the collection. I will say that when we are considering new acquisitions, we are always contemplating how to best augment the museum's existing collection while also enhancing our ability to engage students and faculty on a broad range of topics that are historically notable, but also capable of inspiring critical thinking about contemporary issues. The Van Blood collection has wonderful breadth and great depth in certain subject matter, but there are some genres that are absent from the collection. For example, while writing about this drawing by contemporary Japanese artist Ikeda Manabu for a curriculum about the art of sustainability, I learned that neither the Chazen nor the University Library's special collections have examples of Japanese prints related to historical disasters. Now, this work is titled Meltdown, and in this drawing, what you see here is the artist's response to the 2011 Fukushima Daiichi nuclear catastrophe resulting from an earthquake and tsunami. It's rendered in intricate detail in pen and ink, and it depicts a colossal industrial complex built into a rocky mass and balanced on an icy point, tearing down through a forest, sliding down a mountain slope toward a calm ocean. And what will happen next when this mass plunges into the sea is really anyone's guess. It's a wonderful allegory of suspense and impending doom. On the next slide is a triptych by Utagawa Kokunimasa depicting the aftermath of the Great Mina-Owari earthquake of October 28th in 1891. And I think the addition of one or more images like this one to the Chazen's collection would help contextualize Meltdown by demonstrating Japan's sometimes tenuous relationship with nature as an island nation susceptible to earthquakes and tsunami. So I think it would be a great way to expand our Japanese print collection and put it in dialogue with contemporary Japanese art as well. Further supporting this theme, I'd like to add one or two namatsue, or catfish pictures, an example of which is on this slide. These images invoke a Japanese folk tale where earthquakes are the result of giant catfish. In the story, the god Kashima subdues the catfish and thus keeps the earth from quaking. Namatsue, in the form of color woodcuts, sometimes reflect a social duality resulting from the earthquakes, punishment for some, but profit for others, able to capitalize on a need for rebuilding and revitalization. And here you see Kashima on the left in a tug of war with a catfish, and each of these competitors are being rooted on, Kashima by those who don't want earthquakes, and the catfish by those who would profit from the rebuilding from an earthquake. As Laura has already made clear, Hiroshiga dominates the Chazen's collection, but there are groups of prints by many other Japanese artists that the museum has strategically been enhancing with new acquisitions. There are still opportunities to continue augmenting these holdings with additional works that are both high quality impressions and which survive in good condition. And one artist I've become fascinated with that I think we might pursue further is Utagawa Kuniyoshi. Here you're looking at a wonderful triptych by Kuniyoshi, depicting the legend of Princess Tamatori, in which she recovers a priceless pearl that was stolen by the Dragon King. And in the next slide, you can see a few of Kuniyoshi's delightful sea animal warriors of the dragon's army chasing Tamatori. And the next slide shows a sheet from another triptych by Kuniyoshi titled Graffiti on the Wall of the Treasure Storehouse, and it's featured in Laura's catalog. It's one of the artist's comic pictures and shows caricatures of actors at a time when the depiction of living kabuki actors was prohibited. Although Kuniyoshi followed the rules, technically, he still incorporated sly references alluding to the actors' identities. The drum, for example, and the double-tailed cat refer to specific performances. The Chazen acquired this sheet and the two others from this triptych in 2003, and they certainly help expand the breadth of work by Kuniyoshi in the collection. And I would like to similarly continue adding works like this that round out the Chazen's holdings of Kuniyoshi and of other artists. With regard to research and future exhibitions, I do want to take a moment to point out that the Chazen always has a group of Japanese prints on view in the permanent galleries, and we rotate them every 6 months. Right now, for example, we have 13 works previously owned by Frank Lloyd Wright on view, including this triptych by Kunisada of a restaurant interior. And I selected this group as a part of a collaborative effort with the UW-Madison Center for East Asian Studies, which ran a summer workshop for Wisconsin educators on the topic of Frank Lloyd Wright and the art of Japan. I'm fascinated personally by the way that Wright incorporated Japanese prints into his interior designs and even created these display stands in his signature Prairie School style to fit the various standard sizes of Japanese prints. Here you're looking at a display of Wright's designs at the Art Institute of Chicago, in which there are Japanese prints in several of these stands. And whether it would be in a focused exhibition or as part of a regular rotation in the Chazen's permanent galleries, I would be very keen to present Japanese prints in a context relating them to late 19th and early 20th century American art and design. As I've been exploring the Chazen's collection, I've been working on finding the prints in our collection that also appear in these exhibition photos. Maybe not the exact impression, but I want to see if we have an impression that Frank Lloyd Wright did own that also appears in these photographs. And here on the right, you can see an impression of Hiroshige's view of the bridge at the Tenjin Shrine. An impression of the print also appears in one of the stands in this photograph. In addition to giving museum visitors the opportunity to experience the prints much as Wright did, I think an exhibition could also interrogate elements of Japanism in the work of Wright and other artists, like, for example, James Abbott McNeill Whistler or Henri Toulouse-Lautrec, and that we could really do something quite rich in this area, integrating Japanese prints with the work of artists they influenced. Along with Edward Burr von Vleck's print collection, the Chazen also has his handwritten collection catalog and a noteworthy group of Japanese print auction catalogs and exhibition catalogs, some of which he annotated. The catalog entries in his personal catalog incorporate his knowledge about the various artists represented in his collection, his visual descriptions of the prints, the source and the price of the prints, and also notes about their quality, sometimes including comments made about the print by dealers and other collectors that he showed them to and consulted. On the page here, what you're looking at are Van Vleck's notes about a print by Kitagawa Utamaro, which he purchased from Wright for $150 in 1926. So this is before the Bank of Wisconsin sale by a couple of years. And he made this purchase during a visit that he and his wife made to Taliesin. And here, on the next slide, you see the next print that's described further down that page. This one purchased in August of 1926 from Ernest Leville in Paris. The university archives also has a small selection of Van Vleck's correspondence, mostly related to his role as a professor. But the archive also has two of his day books chronicling his trips to Japan and to Europe. I suspect a focused study of all of these materials with the goal of understanding Van Vleck's interests as a Japanese print collector and situating him within the wider milieu of Japanese print collecting and connoisseurship in the first half of the 20th century could result in a fruitful exhibition, potentially with a related publication. I think it would be an interesting way to use this collection to really examine print collecting, Japanese print collection in the early 20th century.
Thank you, James. You rang some really big bells for me. having worked on the Surimono collection owned by Frank Lloyd Wright, that is still owned by the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation, and having gone through Frank Lloyd Wright's correspondence and his own comments about his prints and how much he paid for them in relation to other things. And just this one page, when you think about $150 he paid in 1929, and 2 years later, it's appraised or sold for $1. It's sort of astonishing how that deal went down, and probably more to be learned from that. And I love the idea of doing a show utilizing Wright's concept of display and the vehicles that he designed for display, and somehow putting that back together again. And what better place to do that in prairie country where Wright lived? It's just the perfect place to do so. So thank you. That was great. So that's the last of my questions, but we have a few questions for the audience, for those who want to hang in a bit longer, if that's okay. Our first question that I have here is an audience member who's wondering if, I assume they're referring to Roger Keyes's book on the Van Vleck collection. Does anyone know, does the museum still have a store of back copies? Are there any way to find it other than paying a lot of money on Amazon or something? James, do you know of?
I think I saw a couple copies in the cafe. So I assume that there are more behind the scenes.
They're still available. Here.
Okay, so whoever asked this question, that's probably the cheapest place you can find it. And they probably would like to clean out your storage lockers down there too and get some of these out of there. But that's great. That's great to know.
May I take a moment just to share one little wonderful thing, a treasure that I have in my office? And that is Roger Keyes' notes about the quality of every impression in the Van Vleck collection, which I keep close at hand. He graded them on a scale from A to F.
Wow. And as you probably know, we just lost Roger not so long ago. Truly the greatest scholar on ukiyo-e of our generation, or the generation before you.
It's true.
So you have all that with his own handwriting. That's quite a treasure. Can that get archived? Can that get scanned and get those notes up on your website?
Yeah, we're already talking about that and how to cross-reference Van Vleck's inventory numbers, Roger Keyes' notes, and then also our accession number. So that could all be spelled out for scholars.
Future publications ahead. That's fantastic. Amy, a question for you. Someone wrote that it seems that not all of the Japanese prints in the Chazen collection are digitized. And they give one example by a triptych, I assume by Yoshitsuya. Is there a plan to complete the digitization, or is that incorrect? I don't know.
I'm actually, James, I'm actually going to turn to you for a second because, well, in general, my understanding about the whole collection is we are fairly comprehensive, but it is in the works on paper area where we have not. We do not have images accessible for everything, and I'm not personally aware of the percentage of the Van Vleck collection. But James, do you have?
I don't know the percentage either. I think it would be fairly a small percentage, but there are occasionally these examples where there isn't a reference image linked to it, and that's something that it might be there. It might be that we have to check a box in the system to say make sure that this gets pushed out to the website. But I'll take it as we're always watching for those situations and taking steps to correct them. So thanks for bringing that to our attention.
Yeah, and just so that you all know, so we are regularly, continuing to take photographs of objects as not only as they come into the collection, but in areas where we're doing specific study, et cetera, so that we can continue to grow the amount that's accessible on the website.
Great. Next question I'm going to throw to Jean and maybe to Laura, especially since Jean has his big regret was not doing enough with the collection. So if you could do a show for Amy and work with James, what kind of ukiyo-e show would you want to pull together?
That's a really good question, Joan. I wouldn't want to go near the Utagawa school for obvious reasons, but I have a real weakness for the earlier prints of the 18th century. They are seldom in as good a condition as the ones in just any museum collection. That's true, but it would be just for sheer delight, I would love to put together sort of greatest hits, from preceding Harunobu to up into those folks immediately after Harunobu. I mean, I don't have a deep intellectual reason for doing that, but I think that the 19th century portions and the late 18th century portions have been highlighted quite a bit. And it would just be nice to go back and sort of figure out a more intellectual reason to do that. But it's partly my aesthetic desire, Laura?
Well, I have one off the top of my head because it was something I was thinking about addressing when I was doing the competition and collaboration exhibition, and decided very early on that I didn't even want to go close to it. And that is the very rich and the extremely numerous collection of Harimaze prints by Utagawa Hiroshige. These are, Joan, you would love this because there's a lot of connections to Surimono in the Harimaze prints. You've got, it's this really rich combination of visual, and also the poetry and the text as well. And there's these really wonderful combinations of images and things. It's hard for me. I wish I had one I could show everyone of what a Harimaze print is, but it has different insets of different pictures, and they're all connected. And when you start looking at that, they're like a brain puzzle, because they're these wonderful collections of images and texts that are puns and plays on each other and have all these wonderful poetic connections and things like that. And so that's one area that I think in this collection is really well suited for that, because it has an amazing collection of Harimaze prints by Hiroshige. And I think that would be one project that definitely be worth, not, if nothing else, a dissertation, because it's just such a rich area. And that would be something I would love to see and that's just because that was something that I was really intrigued with when I was doing the competition and collaboration project.
You believe in a challenge. That's a challenge.
Challenge.
Surimono are a challenge, but Harimaze are really challenging. So maybe you could bring in some of the people from the literature department, the poetry department, the theater department, to unearth all of those puzzles and intellectual challenges that Harimaze provide. But no one's done that. That would be fantastic.
No, they have, and hence the decision me not to even touch it. I'm like, I can't go. I had enough to deal with the other. Like, I can't even touch this right now. This is something that maybe someday down the line I'll come back to. But that would be something I think would be really fascinating.
Great. So I'm going to tie this up because we're drawing on an hour and a half. I want to thank all of you who've hung in there with us tonight, and most especially our really quite wonderful speakers who have shed so much light on this important but not often visited collection up there in Madison, Wisconsin. Hopefully those of you who are looking for domestic travel and not heading abroad, it's a really wonderful destination to go to. If you're in Chicago or heading to Minneapolis, by all means, make a detour to Madison. You all terrific, and I really looking forward to James, some of these future exhibition ideas. Let's hope at least one of them comes to fruition, and maybe you can enlist the service of alums like Jean and Laura to help with those projects. I just want to remind you that our next Zoom talk, which will be on November 10th with Kawase Shinobu and others, and we're coming up with a show in January on Kyoto at the Winter Show, which will be my 40-something year exhibiting there. except for last year where we didn't have it. And it'll be really wonderful to be back doing a fair in the flesh. So those of you who are in the New York area, please put that on your calendar. And thank you all very much for sticking with us tonight. Thank you all. Good night and stay safe.